Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to the first video of round 4. We played the Swans on Saturday night, and today's video is a little bit more of a discussion, a bit of a thought-provoking one. Hopefully we can have a little bit of a chat in the comments down below about team selection and about what our side looks like heading into the game against the Swans on Saturday night. I think the theme of the year, the early theme of the year for North Melbourne, and I've said this multiple times, you're probably sick of me saying it by now, but we are definitely the masters of our own destiny. I feel like we are definitely in control of what is going on field for North Melbourne at the moment, and that is both the good and the bad. We obviously had some incredible moments against the Bulldogs in round 1. That round 2 win against the D's will all remember for a very, very long time to come. And the game on Sunday against the Crows, for me, really came down to the Crows' ability to put a lot of pressure on us and play a really intense game style, forcing us into a lot of errors and then capitalising on those errors. Us, in turn, a young side, probably not mature enough to withstand the pressure and to be able to weather the storm, and unfortunately did give up a lot of the ball quite easily. Up until this point with North so far this year, I felt like there hasn't really been a need to make any big changes. We only had the 2 forced changes between rounds 1 and 2, and we had no changes between rounds 2 and 3, rightly so. But having a look at the way the Crows played on Sunday and how we played on Sunday, it makes me wonder, maybe there's an opportunity to tweak a few bits and pieces heading into this game against the Swans to put our best foot forward and really being able to rectify the deficiencies that I feel like we have in the side at the moment. Now, it's all well and good to say there are deficiencies when you lose by 6 goals coming on the back of a side that every single player who played against the D's played a huge role in that win, and the flip side of that on Sunday was a lot of passengers on the train, and there's been very few players who have been able to consistently perform across the 3 weeks, for mine anyway. So I think there's potential for change in the back, potential for change in the middle, and potential for change forward. I guess I'm not really coming into this with any real key plan. It's just giving you my thoughts on things that might happen and changes we may look to make heading into our game against the Swans on Saturday night. And I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Let me know what you think. Who would you bring in? Who would you give a look to? Who would you look to sub out? And I guess I just want to preface this video as well by saying I really value all of the players and all the contributions they've been able to make across the first 3 rounds of the season. Not all of these are changes I would make based on form. Sometimes it is just going to be a structure thing, and then someone will have to make way to be able to rig that structure a little bit. So I'll leave it there. Before we head into today's video though, I did want to say that on Saturday night, Friends of Fire at Marvel Stadium have very kindly opened their doors to Kanga TV fans. We're going to have a little bit of a pre-game event. I will leave all of the details in the description below, but you know, going to the game over the past couple of weeks against the Dogs and against the D's in particular, and meeting so many of you guys at the games, and, you know, hearing your feedback about Kanga TV has just been overwhelming, and I can't thank you guys enough. I don't think it'll ever get real for me, and so for me to be able to bring all of you guys together and to bring this community element to life on another scale is something that I really, really hope to do. So many North fans really thrive that connection and that relationship with other North fans. So if I can create a space where we can make that possible, then I would love to do so. And we're going to do that on Saturday night. I will be there. Josh from Further North will be there. The North Melbourne Closer to a Flag boys will be there as well. And hopefully you guys can join us for some dinner or a couple of drinks before the game or after the game, meeting you guys. And like I said, being able to share our love for North Melbourne together is something that I really take great pride in, so hopefully I'll be able to see you all there. All the details will be in the description below. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message over the week. But for now, let's just jump into the video. I want to start with the forward line / ruck position, because one thing I noticed about the Crows on the weekend, it's something Corey McKernan spoke about a lot when we were doing the live stream as well. The Crows, yes, they have a lot of tools in their forward line, but they are always on the move, and there is always one of them, and it was Riley Riley Thilthorpe in particular on the weekend, who is pushing and presenting up at the ball. And I love Jack Darling, and I really love the recruitment of him, and I think he's really revolutionised the forward line and the way it functions around him. Nick Larkey, Darling, Curtis and Zohar have each kicked at least 1 goal per game this season, and I think that's a good return. And then Constanti's chipped in as well. So I really like the way it's functioning forward, but I feel like for us, especially when we're trying to transition the ball from the back half of the ground to the forward half of the ground, we seem to be over-possessing the ball, not a lot of run and carry, and not a lot of precision kicks down the line, because there's so many players who just stand still and don't move, and they're quite stagnant and don't move into space. So we're just kicking to contest constantly, and then we're being outmarked because we don't have a lot of tall options forward to the ball. If the likes of a Jack Darling or a Nick Larkey are presenting up at the ball, then who's forward as a target? We all know North midfielders love a helicopter kick into the forward 50 as well. So that just makes it really, really difficult. I feel like Jack Darling just needs to stay forward, and I think we probably need to look at a third tall to bring in to do that hybrid ruck forward role. Tristan Cherry went off with a hamstring complaint and was sidelined for a lot of the first quarter, and while we looked so much better when he did come on the ground and we looked a lot more structured and well-rounded when he was on the ground, Jack Darling did carry a lot of the ruck load that day, and he just looked gassed by the end of the day. And I feel like not only is that wasting his potential and his core skill set forward of the ball, I also just feel like we're running him into the ground, and it's not really doing anyone any favours. So while I really like what Robert Hansen Jr. has brought to the side, and I do think he does deserve another shot, I'm not saying that he is the person I would drop because of form. I just think he'd be the one potentially to make way if we were to make a change to bring in a Teakle or a Finbar Maley. Finbar's debut has been teased a couple of times already so far this season. We know Bryn Teakle is a really solid option as that hybrid ruck forward role. It would be a shame if Robert Hansen Jr. did have to step aside based on one lackluster performance, because when he is around the ball, he is really exciting. But Constanti has probably been the one for me so far. I know they offer different things, sure, but if we're comparing them, Constanti's probably been the standout of the two small forwards so far this season, and he's the one I would opt to keep in the side. His defensive pressure is really, really good, but he's also been able to hit the scoreboard in the past couple of weeks, which has definitely been something we've been missing for a very, very long time out of a small forward. Ironically, kicking goals is the thing we're missing out of our small forward. So I would really, really like to see us potentially explore that option or find a way to keep Jack Darling forward 90% of the time. Of course, injuries are something that happen during a game and they're not avoidable. And what happened to Tristan Cherry on Sunday, while he wasn't out for the game and he played all 4 quarters in the end, he definitely did expect Darling to take more of the ruck load than I think he normally would. And it's just not something I think benefits us or JD, to be honest, and the way our game flows. JD should be the one presenting up at the ball, or he should be staying in the forward line and let Larkey present forward of the ball. I just don't think that having him in the ruck is really doing anyone any favours at the moment, and we really need to use him for his size and for his ability to create a contest and bring the ball to ground if he's not out marking his opponent, or if he's not tackling his opponent or someone else in the forward line. So when it comes to the forward structure, as I said, I think Robert Hansen Jr. has had a good start to the year, and he definitely looks exciting, and you can tell that he's threatening to get better and better as each week goes on, but I don't know if that's enough compared to the output we're getting from Constanti at the moment, and potentially we do look to make way for a taller player. Now, how we go under the roof at Marvel, obviously that forward structure we've had has worked for the first 2 games at Marvel Stadium so far this season. It just seems a little bit of wind at Adelaide Oval and the wide ground, we were unable to really capitalise on that forward structure. So I don't know, maybe this conversation doesn't happen now that we're back at Marvel, but it's just something that I wanted to put on the agenda and something we could potentially think about. Moving to the middle of the ground, and this is probably a pain point for a lot of North supporters and maybe a big flaw in our recruitment in previous seasons. We are just way too attacking in the middle of the ground, and it's all well and good when we win the ball out of the middle of the ground and we dispose of it effectively, but then if the ball comes back the other way, or we aren't able to win the ball out of the middle of the ground first up, then we just struggle to combat the opposition's attack. And Will Phillips is a really interesting case, and I feel like Will Phillips is someone that is spoken about so often because there is this expectation around him and what he should be delivering at pick 3. I really liked his game on the weekend from a in and under clearance perspective. I also really liked it from a tackling perspective. We know what he can do when he's given a tagging role on a key player. I also think that Parker was excellent on the weekend in terms of his tackling pressure and his 1%ers and pressure efforts and intensity, but we definitely do lack power defensive players in the middle of the ground. Will Phillips doesn't do enough for me. He does a lot of good stuff, but whether he does enough of it, I'm not sure. And George Wardlaw will be returning to the VFL this weekend, so potentially in the next week or two, he's going to be knocking on the door for senior selection, and naturally Will Phillips is the one to step aside. But it's so hard when it comes to Will Phillips because I feel like he's a player that actually just needs the time at senior level to be able to prove himself and settle and really show us what he's made of. But I don't feel like he's getting the time because inevitably we've got such a stacked midfield that there are going to be big players that are going to be missing out on position. So while he has looked good over the past few weeks and I have really enjoyed what I've seen from Will Phillips, I don't know if I've seen enough from Will Phillips still in terms of I've seen enough that he can play and I've seen enough to suggest that he can fill that hole defensively, but I haven't seen enough to suggest that he can do enough of it in a game more so than a George Wardlaw will be able to do when he comes back into the side or Luke Parker's already doing. And it's very frustrating because I think about that Melbourne game and I spoke about LDU and how his defensive game was probably the best I've ever seen from him and his two-way running was elite, and I've never seen a game like that from LDU. For him to back it up the following week with not a lot of footy and very, very little impact defensively, it's really frustrating because there's no reason as to why he shouldn't be able to, if he's not getting hands on the ball, then at least stop the opposition from getting their hands on the ball. And this is what is stopping us from being a better side and really matching it with the best sides in the competition. Now, the Crows have started the year very, very well, and a lot of them have just labelled them as almost unstoppable in this early stages of the year. We don't know how much of that is true, but they're doing a lot right, and they definitely are a difficult side to match up against. We've never won a game at Adelaide Oval, and you'd argue that 12 months ago we lose Sunday's game by 70, 80 points, but I can't help but feel like it's our lack of work rate there and our lack of intensity that allowed the game to slip so quickly from our grasp, and we know they're capable of it. We saw it in the flesh against the D's 2 weeks ago, and the D's look like they're a mile off where the Crows are at the moment, but I don't think that should change our work rate and our effort. So how many defensive midfielders do you have and how do you strike that balance? Because the backline clearly needs support, and the game once again against the D's showed to me that when there's pressure from higher up the ground, then the backline actually are able to do their job. Charlie Comben, Aiden Core, and Toby Pink all played very well last week against the Crows, last week against the D's, and individually against the Crows, they all had pretty decent games as well. So it's just about working together in that unit and that structure. I mentioned George Wardlaw coming back from injury. Whether we look to make any changes before he returns, I don't know. It's probably more the players that are in there at the moment need to just dig deeper to find that defensive element, or re-find, I should say, that defensive element to their game, because it's something that really is missing, and it's so obvious when it's not there, but when it is there, it completely changes our game. It completely changes the way our side looks. So it's definitely something that I would be watching and hoping we can find a way to bring back into the game coming up on Saturday night. Moving to the back line now, there's a couple of different points I want to touch on with the back line. The first is Griffin Logue is expected to put his hand up for selection for Saturday night's game. Whether he will pass a fitness test or not is a different story. It's probably something we'll only find out on Thursday night when the teams are released. But it's a shame. I feel like Toby Pink's had a very, very good fortnight, but probably just a victim of the system, I suppose. And someone does need to make way for Griffin Logue, and it's not going to be Charlie Comben, and it's not going to be Aidan Corr. And like I said, I do feel for Toby Pink, and potentially we spoke about maybe bringing in a Finbar or a Bryn Teakle to play forward. Toby Pink did play forward a fair bit in the second half of last season, so potentially is looking to move him forward. He could play a bit of a defensive role, see if he can get his hands on the footy. Maybe he goes into the middle and, helps Sherry out in the ruck as well. I don't know what the answer is for Toby Pink. It would be a real shame and disappointing, I think, for him if he couldn't somehow find a way to keep his spot in the side. But Griffin Logue will need to come back into this side because one-on-one he is such a crucial defender for us. Charlie Comben is the interceptor, and that is the role that suits him best. That allows us to play to his strengths, and I think for the team we look so much more balanced when it's Aidan Corr and Griffin Logue given the 1-2 lockdown roles, with Charlie Comben floating and sort of doing what he needs to do across the half back line. So that would be a shame for Toby Pink, but it probably will be the way it goes, whether Griff comes back this week, next week. It's inevitable. In the next few weeks it'll make his return. The other one I want to talk about is Caleb Daniel, because I'm sitting on the fence with Caleb Daniel in this early start of the season, and I don't know if he's a victim of circumstance the same way Toby Pink is, or if there's something a little bit deeper going on. Caleb Daniel came from the Bulldogs, and I think a lot of us are very excited about the recruitment, what he could offer coming off half back, being that real rebounding, attacking defender, and really giving us a solid link-up option when we are looking to move the ball from the back half of the ground. Hasn't really done it for me yet this season, and I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's the fact that he doesn't have solid options presenting at him when he is moving the ball out of our back line. So often he was the one moving the ball closer to the centre of the ground, and he was sort of just turning it over, or it wasn't really doing much with the ball. I think he is definitely one that comes to mind when I think of over-possessing the ball. Gets a lot of it, but how much of it is actually having an impact, I'm not really sure. So whether it's just something that will take some time, whether he needs to build up that synergy between himself and the midfield, I do think that the midfield and even some of the forwards that do present higher up the ground are quite stagnant. I feel like we don't move enough. We sort of just stand and expect the ball to come our way and us be able to mark it, whether us maybe looking to actually run into space or create space and create more options for ourselves is probably the way we need to go. So that is probably the thing with Caleb Daniel that's really disappointed me the most. Also, part of me feels like maybe we need to bring another player in to help and support him. I know Finn O'Sullivan is in that defensive role, but he isn't doing heaps of attacking for me. I feel like he is playing slightly more traditional defender, not an entire lockdown role, but he's definitely not playing the same role that Caleb Daniel's playing, if that makes sense. It's definitely not the same as we saw McKercher and Fisher do last season or Sheasel did the year before. Maybe Darcy Tucker's the one that needs to make way to bring in the likes of O'Reilly Hardiman. I actually think Fisher would have been the perfect replacement this week, and I absolutely would have seen him put his hand up. He's had a really good few weeks in the VFL, but he unfortunately got injured. He was concussed in the VFL over the weekend, which is such a shame because I think he would have been perfect to bring in. Riley Hardiman didn't play in the VFL over the weekend. I really hope that we can see him in the side in the next few weeks. I think he definitely has earned it. He's definitely had a big pre-season and off-season and put in the work, and he was floated as an option for Sunday's game against the Crows but didn't make it. So I'm just wondering if we try and inject a little bit more run into the back line. Luke McDonald, I think, has been outstanding so far this season. I touched on it in my review, and I think maybe stepping down as co-captain has allowed him to just enjoy his footy and relax a little bit, and he has been playing a really, really dangerous role. He's been really important for us, I think, and we would definitely keep him in the side if it's coming between Tucker and Luke McDonald, but we also can't forget that we do have Jackson Archer to return from suspension, so he'll miss one more game and then he comes back into the side. So again, it's sort of like a do you wait and see? I'm really unsure because I don't like making changes for the sake of making changes, but is this making changes for the sake of making changes? Like, I'm just sort of putting things out there and seeing how I feel or where they land, and then are you going to make a bunch of changes now and then have Griffin Logue and Jackson Archer ready to come back in for gather round? You're making more changes because there needs to be a reasonable time frame, like I said, for these players to gel. The backline had 20 odd players coming through it last season, and that is just so disruptive, and that doesn't really help anyway. It doesn't help us create a solid foundation for any player just to slip in and out of, like one player here or there, if there's injuries or if there's form that needs to be rewarded. So I wonder how we approach the backline as well, and who would come out for that. Maybe Finn O'Sullivan moves higher up the ground. He was really, really good in that last quarter, the way he was just sort of dancing around the Crows players and spinning out of trouble left, right, and centre. So a lot of options, a lot of options, and a lot of potential names to throw into the mix. And it's nice to kind of feel like we have, on paper anyway, some serious depth in this side. In reality, how many of these guys are actually putting their hand up in the VFL is another story. But I think maybe given the opportunity, they'll be able to step up and really make something of the opportunity that they're given. I don't know what the answer is for the side on Saturday, and I'm not really willing to put my bets on anything. It was more just a few thoughts I had, and I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to share them with you guys, see what you had to say, and if you had any ideas of your own, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of our side, where it stands right now after 3 rounds, and what we might expect to see at the selection table before we play the Swans? Leave all your thoughts in the comments below. Share them with me on socials, Kanga TV Show on Instagram, X, Facebook. You can send me an email as well. Hopefully we can have a chat about it pre-game on Saturday at Friends of Fire. I'll leave the details for that event in the description below as well. I look forward to seeing you guys a bit later in the week for the preview. Go Roos.